We live in a world where screens aren't optional anymore. They're how we work, communicate, plan, and relax. So a conversation or narrative around, oh, just reduce your screen time, isn't the reality anymore. Instead, the conversations in 2026 are shifting towards digital well-being, how screens affect sleep, stress physiology, cognitive load, focus, and more. We're learning how to work with technology, not against it. Today, we're going to be breaking down how screen exposure affects your sleep, what it does to the stress system, why it affects focus and attention, and the emerging shift towards digital well-being rather than restriction. The language around screens has begun to change. It's less about abstinence and more about interaction patterns. And there's three main shifts we're starting to see. One, digital environments instead of screen time totals. People are evaluating what they're doing on screens, not just how long. Two, cognitive load awareness. We know now that passive scrolling, multitasking, and constant context switching have measurable effects on attention, memory, and mood. Three, physiological considerations. Screen use isn't just a mental experience. It has a downstream effect on cortisol, circadian rhythm, dopamine, heart rate, and sensory load. This sets the stage for why screens truly impact our sleep, our stress, and our focus. So now let's go into each of those a little bit more in depth. Let's begin by understanding how sleep is impacted by your screens. Number one is that your circadian rhythm is disrupted. This happens by screen exposure in the evenings or before bed, creating a bright or blue shifted light on the retina, which is signaling to the brain that it is daytime. Now, you may be familiar with this because this is how we got that craze of blue light blocking glasses. Essentially, what's happening is light from your screen is hitting your retina. It's communicating to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which suppresses melatonin. So the melatonin's not being released, which is going to delay sleep pressure. So that's just one of the impacts. The second impact is cortisol timing. Light and stimulating content can elevate cortisol late in the evening. Remember that cortisol is your stress hormone. As this shifts closer to bedtime, it's going to show up as delayed sleep, busy mind, and waking up feeling less restored and rested. Number three is dopaminergic stimulation. This is the system that produces dopamine. If you are consuming fast-paced, novelty-rich content, it's going to increase your dopamine release, which competes with your brain's sleep drive. This is delaying the natural downshift into parasympathetic dominance, which is required for sleep. The outcome or the takeaway that I want you to have is not that screens are inherently bad, but it's important to understand that the brightness, the timing, and the content all matter. Now let's take a look at how screens impact your stress. Chronic screen exposure interacts with the stress system in three main ways. Number one, sensory load. Our nervous systems are wired for manageable sensory bandwidth. When we're on screens, it's going to amplify visual input, auditory input, emotional input, and cognitive input. This increases baseline activation. Number two is social and emotional input. Messaging, work tasks, notifications, news, and comparison-driven platforms can increase anticipatory stress, even when nothing is happening offline. The system ends up in a low-grade fight or flight posture. And it's not being dramatic, it's just activated. Number three is cognitive fragmentation. Switching between tasks, tabs, and apps trains the brain to constantly reorient. This reduces working memory and increases mental fatigue, which the brain registers as stress. The nervous system isn't overwhelmed by the screens itself, but rather the pace and the density of the input. Lastly, before we start to learn how we can make that shift into digital well-being, let's look at the impact screens have on focus. Number one, task switching. Each switch carries a cognitive switch cost, if you will. Across a day, this fragments your attention and reduces sustained focus. Number 2 is dopamine conditioning. Fast feedback environments such as scrolling, notification, in-app rewards train attention toward novelty. Long focused tasks like reading, writing, planning become harder because they lack the immediate novelty you've learned to expect. 3, micro interruptions. Even seeing notifications without opening them increases cognitive load because the brain begins processing that now unfinished task. Over time, this shifts people toward horizontal attention, which is wide and shallow, rather than vertical attention, which is singular, one activity, right, and deep. So what does all of this mean if we don't want to move into abstinence, right? And we are dependent on our screens for so much of our day-to-day lives, and much of that actually cannot change. What does a shift in 2026 look like for a more digitally well-balanced life? Well, a lot of it's going to come down to dosage and design. So let's get into it. Number 1 is light management. Blue light filters, just like those blue light blocking glasses. My massive Mac monitor, I actually have a blue light screen, a physical screen that goes on top of it that filters out blue light. Warm color temperatures after sunset. So a lot of our phones now have settings that allow you to go into dark mode or warm colors after a certain time. Lower your brightness in the evenings, and honestly, as much as you can, lower your brightness. Bring in more natural light exposure in your environment, especially in the morning. So before going on your screen, or even if you have to use your screen, can you bring in natural sunlight? Or I've talked about this in another video, there are now lamps and lights that manufacture the same ability of sunlight, the same exposure that you'd be getting in natural sunlight. Bring in more of that. Number 2 is input management. Maybe you can batch your notifications instead of getting real-time alerts, or turning off a lot of notifications that you may not actually need. You can reduce context switching. So stop going from tab to tab, from task to task. Really focus on one thing, even if it's on a screen. And then intentional consumption versus passive scrolling. Really take a conscious look at what you're doing with your time on the screen and what is needed. 3 is cognitive recovery. Your brain needs downtime without input, not just sleep. I talk to so many clients about this. Sure, I understand you are not on your screen when you're asleep, but you need present moment, conscious awareness and time that is outside of a screen, that is without input. So this might mean reducing sensory stimulus, being bored, finding stillness and learning to be okay with that, and monotasking, which is doing one singular thing at a time. It's important to understand that these aren't productivity hacks, they're neurological resetting conditions. Lastly, number 4, the evening downshift. More and more people are starting to treat the 1 to 2 hours before bed as a physiological phase, so very intentional, not just leftover time that they can doom scroll or try to trick themselves into thinking they're down regulating when really they're just still over consuming and overstimulating themselves. And I know a lot of people are making it this big thing. It can be as simple as 20 to 30 minutes. And it's not about perfection or withdrawal from your device. It's about relationship. It's about choosing what you want within your own life and creating that environment. The reality is screens are not going anywhere, and digital life is also not the problem. The real struggle is unstructured digital environments where we're just passively scrolling or being unintentional with our notifications and our context switching. The more presence, intentionality, and awareness we can bring into our digital environments, the better we are going to start to feel. Not simply about reducing or restricting or limiting, but making conscious choices. Understanding the impacts of screens on sleep, stress, and focus gives you the autonomy to choose how to interact within the system, not fight against it or resist it. If you want more applied nervous system or psychological education, please hit that subscribe button. I make new videos every Sunday and Wednesday. I also have free resources down below if you're interested. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.